Pikmin 3 is hands down my favorite Pikmin game. There are things that the other 3 entries do better than this one, the atmosphere and speedrunning potential of the first game, the 4th game has more content and more variety in said content, and Pikmin 2 has a more enjoyable story. But this game is by far the most fun and engaging entry in the series, and after playing all 4 games back to back, this was the one I was most eager to revisit. In fact, after finishing 4, I did a co-op run of 3 with my younger brother. The other games in the series require a lot more downtime in between repeat visits, and for that reason alone I consider this one superior. But it's not the only reason, and to get into that, we have to start talking about the game proper. Let's get into why Pikmin 3 is an overlooked masterpiece. Pikmin 3 is a very pretty game, as one would expect from a Wii U game. While it's an underpowered machine, Nintendo still delivered some phenomenal looking games. The environments are more impressive than they ever were in the GameCube titles, and every frame is a delight, especially the juice, which is so satisfying to watch at the end of every day. The developers intentionally made it so that you can't skip the juice collection scenes because they knew just how exquisite the thing they made was, especially when the juice combines to create a new color. But where the game really shines with its presentation is with its soundtrack. All of them offer this carefree vibe that really fits with what the series is. I especially love Twilight River, Rainfall, and the Garden of Hope. They're some of the best pieces of music in the series. While none of these area tracks are on the same level as Distant Spring for me, they get pretty close. I also love how tense, stressful, and generally weird the formidable oak interior is. It really fits with what the mysterious life form is. Now there are 2 things that detractors would bring up as to why they disagree with my opinion that Pikmin 3 is the best game. The first of these reasons is that it's short. I've always felt that this has been one of the most shallow criticisms you can throw at a game. It says nothing about whether or not it justifies the playtime. If a game is 20 hours but only has 5 hours of meaningful content, then that's a problem. And if a game has the potential to be a 10-hour experience but only offers 3 hours of content, then that's a problem. Even then, I find that shorter games are usually on the better side of things compared to longer games. I'd rather be disappointed that a concept wasn't developed further than being bored as a game arbitrarily stretches itself far beyond its concept's limitations. Neither of these problems really applies to Pikmin 3. Sure, it's a shorter game, and people have brought this up, but my counter-argument is to ask what they could possibly have added to make the game longer. Does the game even need to be longer? What is inherently the problem with a short but replayable game? If it's a price thing, then that's a different discussion altogether. Price has nothing to do with whether or not a game is good. Plus, more people need to think about how much replayability is on offer, because even disregarding the side content, especially with 3 Deluxe on Switch, Pikmin 3 is easily worth the $60. Another one of the main reasons that people will disagree with me on this game would definitely be the difficulty. A lot of people really liked how hard the first 2 games were, and usually bring up the general ease as a point of contention with the latter 2 games. I don't think this is a wrong approach to take, but I also don't particularly agree with it myself. To me, Pikmin was never a series defined by how hard it was in the same way that Dark Souls is. The difficulty that stemmed from the first game, which wasn't associated with jank I should add, was there to enhance the vibe and atmosphere of the game. It's full of wonder and mystery, and a weird charm that permeates through the whole experience. But at its core, it's the story of an average man fighting tooth and nail to outrun the clock and return to his loved ones. I find that no other game in the series really justifies being a difficult experience because that difficulty doesn't tie into the story or atmosphere in interesting ways. The difficulty that stemmed from the second game highlights the absurdity and frustrations of the central plot. Olimar's reunion with his family is cut short because of his idiot boss and coworkers' blunder. It helps strengthen a core idea of the narrative, that being that it highlights the biggest problem with capitalism and how it makes employees' entire lives revolve around work and making money, with no time left for what they want to do. In these games, it strengthens narrative ideas, but in 3 and 4, I don't see how it would change things. Honestly, I feel no difference playing on ultra spicy difficulty compared to the regular difficulty. I'd also like to bring up that while these later entries lower the difficulty, depending on how you play, the level of challenge remains the same. This next part is probably going to be the most pretentious thing you ever heard in your life, so please bear with me. The definition of difficulty is needing much effort or skill to accomplish, deal with, or understand, while the definition of challenging is testing one's abilities, demanding. For example, Demise from Skyward Sword tests how well you know the sword play, but he's not a hard boss. I think this same concept applies to these latter Pikmin games. The Dandori Caves test how well you can strategize to collect everything in a timely manner, but outside of the last few, I managed to complete them all on my first attempt, and even the trickier ones took at most 3 or 4 attempts. Despite how easy a lot of them were, they still challenged my abilities, and that's the reason that 3 and 4 dropping how hard they were doesn't really bother me that much. 3 is by far the easiest game in the series, I don't deny that. You technically have a limited amount of time to beat the game like in the first entry. Instead of it being a hard limit, it's fluid because of the juice system. Time limit can be increased with the more fruit that you collect. The problem is that you get a lot of extra days to complete the game because of how much juice you get for collecting the fruit. Even after Louis steals all of your juice like the vile pig that he is, you can easily get a comfortable amount of juice in relatively little time. The way that the game challenges you can be easily sidestepped because this system doesn't do a whole lot to encourage you to get more than 1 or 2 fruits a day. But if you do decide to get as many fruits in one day as possible, then you get the most satisfying gameplay in the series. Multitasking between your 3 different captains and keeping track of everything that they're doing is a ton of fun. You can send them to go to specific areas, and they'll call out when they arrive or pick when they're in trouble somewhere. Even in the switch port, it's easy to quickly switch between them and keep track of what they're doing. I don't think I can really put into words just how fun and rewarding multitasking in this game is. There are even a few environmental puzzles where you need to use all 3 captains to progress. They aren't particularly complex, but figuring them out and incorporating those into your day's route feels good. Speaking of those captains, I guess it's here that we get to what is arguably the weakest part of the game, that being the narrative. I think that Pikmin 3 easily has the weakest story and characters out of the 4 games. The first game is really small and personal, and Olimar having so much characterization is why the game has one of the best stories of any Nintendo game. The second game introduces one of the best characters ever created, Louis, who I love to hate more than any other character in any other piece of fiction, and the president, who's just a silly little man. There is no way in heck that they would ever match these characters unless you count Ochi and Moss, in which case disregard that last statement. The stakes are at their lowest in the series, but it makes up for that by just being fun. When I get to the 4th game, I'll bring up why I like that game's story and whatnot, but needless to say that it's better than 3's. The stakes are the highest they've ever been in the 3rd game. The planet of Kopai is under threat of starvation, so 3 explorers are sent to PNF 404 to collect a sustainable source of food to save their homeworld. The problem is that it's a very impersonal story. I don't feel a personal connection to any of these characters or their struggles. The 4th game sidesteps this issue since you get to create your own Pikmin OC, and you're responsible for the rescue and safety of everyone at the base. So naturally I feel more of a connection to those guys. Olimar and Louis receive a lot of subtle characterization in their logs, Picklepedia entries, and the emails that they receive, which makes them compelling characters. Charlie is a bit of a man-child who maybe has a wife. Brittany likes juice or something, and Alf is an engineer. He has an older sister and 12 brothers. His grandfather designed the SS Drake. He definitely gets the most characterization and is easily my favorite. Don't get me wrong, I like them. They're charming enough, and there's enough here for them to carry the game's narrative. But I wish that we got to know more about them. There are end-of-day logs that they give like in the first game, but they don't deepen the characters and are mostly just observational or comedic. And very rarely do we get anything like what we got with Olimar in the first game, with his poignant and thoughtful logs. In Pikmin 4, we get a lot of conversations between these characters that, while they also don't deepen them too much, it does give us more of an idea of what their personalities and relationships with each other are, and I wish that we got more of that kind of thing here. Also, brief side note, but I think that the okay ending is actually my favorite ending narration. The idea that Kopai is saved, but they had to be careful and be smart to avoid running into the same predicament in the future is a nice, ominous, yet also happy ending that ties to the more somber points of the first game, and if collecting all the fruits wasn't so much fun, I'd probably only gather the amount to get this one personally. Pikmin 3, being released 9 years after Pikmin 2, introduces a lot more quality of life features and other such things that make going back to the GameCube games exceptionally difficult. My favorite is that Pikmin who are actively in the middle of a task need to be whistled at twice before they stop working on it, which means that gathering idle Pikmin is far less of a hassle here than it was previously. Electricity no longer instantly kills Pikmin, solving that inconsistency from the second game, and it is much appreciated. The last major one worth mentioning is that there are no longer multiple onions. While I do miss slowly amassing a group of them, it is a lot more convenient just merging them with each other. Also, the marble effect is cool and I like how it looks. They changed some of the controls too, replacing the swarm function with camera controls, which I personally prefer. It feels a lot more natural to me. Swarming was replaced with a charge, which is a nice feature. It's not quite as risky to charge at an enemy compared to swarming them, but it's not like it's an instant win button because the enemy can shake them off and eat them, so you need to be sure that it's optimal play at that point. I have seen some people say that combat was dumbed down, but I disagree, unless those people were invented in my head, in which case I absolutely smashed the strawmen in my head. They just gave you a different way to approach combat, with the enemies taking fewer hits to damage. This game also removes white Pikmin and purple Pikmin from the base game, which honestly I can't be too upset about because the purples would have broken this game even more than they did in Pikmin 2. The new Pikmin types introduced here are some of my favorites in the series. Winged Pikmin are glorious. They can fly over water and offer a ton of help when transporting things back to base. The trade-off is that outside of specific enemies that were designed with them in mind, they are the worst at combat. Rock Pikmin are beefy boys like the purples, but they can't stun enemies, and they also can't stick to things, they just bounce off. So they aren't too effective when charging them at enemies and such. They're a lot more balanced and are fantastic additions to the roster. When Nintendo decided to port the game over to the Nintendo Switch in 2020, they not only brought over all the DLC content alongside it, but added even more stuff to propel it as the second best port behind 3D World, though Bowser's Fury does a lot of heavy lifting in that department. The content added here is definitely the weakest the game has to offer, but it's still pretty great. You play as Olimar and Louie in the events leading up to Pikmin 3's story and after the story. It's a bunch of fun time challenges, like gathering as many Pikmin as possible, trying to kill all the enemies, collecting enough treasures, etc. It can get a bit repetitive, but honestly I don't mind too much because of how much of a joy playing this game is anyway. And any excuse to play more of this game is a win in my book. Also, I think that the challenges from the original DLC are of the same quality, but you have purples and whites too, so it's a little more varied than the base game compared to here. Another thing that the Switch port added was co-op play to the series. After having experienced the game in both single player and multiplayer, I definitely prefer how it feels going solo. You lose all of the beautiful multitasking that makes this game so much fun, though it's not like playing with somebody else completely destroys the game or anything. It still remains a great time. It replaces that multitasking with cooperation, which can definitely make it a bit more manageable if you want to beat the game in a timely manner. Plus, it's a nice way to ease somebody into the series if they aren't familiar with Pikmin. The only area of the game I think is negatively impacted by co-op is Formidable Oak, since the thing that makes it such a great final challenge is having to juggle the 3 different captains and their tasks simultaneously, which is completely gone if you have one person guiding the Plasm Wraith around. Regardless, it was a pretty fun way to revisit the game with a fresh lens. Pikmin 3 has easily the best level design of any Pikmin game. There's a lot more depth in how you get around them compared to the other games. Even Pikmin 4's main areas aren't quite as interesting as what's offered here. For one thing, these areas are pretty big, and they offer a variety of routes depending on how much you want to get done in a day, with several different pathways that you and your Pikmin can take. They also offer more mechanical differences between them that differentiate them beyond superficial elemental hazards like the previous games. Tropical Wilds is a standard Pikmin area with a couple of fruits you need either winged Pikmin or blue Pikmin to gather, as they're across a body of water, but it does offer an interesting little puzzle in comparison to even the usual basic opening area. In order to access another fruit, you need to get to the upper ledge to gain access to a cave, and in order to get this access, you need to find the other of these 2 platforms that raise and lower depending on how much weight is on the other side. While later areas use this concept of raising and lowering platforms, this is the only one that specifically requires you to go out of your way to find where the other one is located, and it's not in a super obvious place either, making it fairly satisfying to figure out. The Garden of Hope is an area that you visit at 2 points in the game, split into a water-based level, as the penultimate area in a Pikmin game usually is, and a bit more of a standard Pikmin starting area where you rescue Brittany. I find it pretty neat how the game recontextualizes this location once you find the blue Pikmin. If you're being as efficient as possible, it's almost like it's 2 separate areas crammed into one. In the moment, I often forget this even was the same area that I rescued Brittany in. The pacing of the game in general is pretty good. It offers a lot more structure compared to the original Pikmin, where it's very loose with how you approach it, while there are a few more roadblocks involved. This does make the original Pikmin the most fun to speedrun for efficiency and whatnot, but it's a lot more varied here. It throws far more interesting set pieces and obstacles your way that are spaced out a lot more than non-linear design can handle. The first day on the distant tundra shows this pretty well, with Alph and Brittany crashing once again and landing on opposite sides of a river. It's a neat little showcase of why they need to find the captain, as they obviously aren't great at piloting it on their own. Anyway, you need to trade Pikmin at one spot so you can build the bridge from both sides since there aren't enough pieces on just one. It's a great use of the central appeal of the game for me, and it acts as a nice test to get you comfortable with utilizing multiple captains, which will be an essential ability when you get to the Formidable Oak. The navigation of this area in general is a ton of fun, with a variety of caves and winding pathways that lead to a variety of different set pieces. But where navigation of these different pathways peaks is with Twilight River, the best level of any Pikmin game. For one thing, it's massive, almost twice the size of a regular Pikmin level. You're locked to one half until you rescue the winged Pikmin to move a branch, allowing for lily pads to flow downriver to take you to the second half of the level. And these lily pads are one of the big reasons that this level is so much fun. When you first land here, you're stuck on an isolated island, and you need to hop onto these lily pads to access different land masses. Having to solely rely on these lily pads would make the level tedious the longer you play it though, so then it gifts you with the second reason this is the best level in all of Pikmin. As you access new parts of the level, you can unlock a shortcut that either connects 2 different land masses, or offers a quicker path to the landing site. This is a part of most areas in Pikmin games, but with this one in particular, it's really satisfying. Also, it's easily the prettiest area in the game. The leaf texture plastered all over the ground, the primarily orange color palette, and the general autumn aesthetic accompanied by the wonderful music make for an area that I vibe in for hours. I love this level with all my heart, and look forward to revisiting it more than any other of the already phenomenal areas in the game. The Formidable Oak, as you might have predicted by this point, is by far the best final area of any Pikmin game. The first game offered a neat challenge utilizing all of the Pikmin, but outside of that, it doesn't offer too much in terms of actual gameplay. Wistful Wild, apart from the wonderful autumn aesthetic and having the best name of any of these final levels, mostly just feels like another level, with the caves being the only thing giving it the effect of being the last area in the game, which is also a characteristic shared with the Primordial Thicket from Pikmin 4. This area is nothing more than a final challenge, like in Pikmin 1, but unlike the final trial, this one is much longer and tests your abilities far more. When you land, it's eerily quiet. There's an empty circular area that doesn't seem to serve much purpose. The only way forward is a long, winding path. When you get to the highest point of the level, you find Captain Olimar being harassed by a mysterious life form. After easily subduing it, you are then tasked with safely getting him to the SS Drake. But once you enter the cave, you find it chasing you. The final challenge is the best escort mission in the history of gaming. Captain Olimar's logs carry this sense of eeriness and dread, a progression of events that slowly paint a picture of hopelessness and build up to the horror of the Plasm Wraith. There's no explanation given for this thing and why it's so drawn to Olimar, and I think it's neat to have an antagonistic creature become interested in him, as opposed to the friendly Pikmin. While it isn't as deadly as the Water Wraith, I feel the same sense of dread encountering the Plasm Wraith, mainly because of the great music and narrative significance. It isn't an instant game over if it catches Olimar, since you can attack it to get him back. Instead, you want to prevent it from capturing him because if it does, it will take up your precious time, and when the day ends, you're stuck with whatever progress you've already made, which helps keep the tension high without being overly frustrating. This entire section is dedicated to multitasking between different tasks. Obviously, my goodness, am I such a good writer. The Pikmin carrying Olimar will follow Brittany, and Charlie and Alf are tasked with clearing the way forward. The Plasm Wraith will follow Brittany first, Charlie second, and Alf third. And in order to get through this gauntlet of challenges efficiently, you'll need to use this information to get an effective strategy. You can't focus on Charlie and Alf's tasks for too long, since then Olimar will be in danger, putting you at risk of wasting time. And you also can't focus too much on Brittany, since then you'll never make any progress. You're forced to split your party up into different sections, and it is beyond satisfying to make your way through it. No Pikmin finale comes even close to topping how good this one is, which isn't to say that they don't have good endings, just that they aren't quite as fun as this one. Another thing that Pikmin 3 does best is the bosses. In the other three games, with the exception of the Titan Dweevil and the Ancient Sirehound, they all feel like tougher enemies and not actual fights. This isn't a problem, since it's effective for the gameplay and organic for the world, but there's something about the core boss fights in Pikmin 3 that just really hit the spot and is probably my biggest disappointment with the bosses in Pikmin 4. They're enormous, commanding a far bigger presence than the other bosses. The lines between big enemy and boss fight are blurred in the other games, but it is abundantly clear in 3 that this is not the case. This wouldn't matter if the bosses weren't fun, but these bosses aren't just fun, they're the most fun fights in the series. There are some boss-like encounters like in the other 3 games, like the Burrowing Snagrid in its most pathetic incarnation yet. Shaggy Longlegs is like the Beady Longlegs but with hair, how neat. The Bug-Eyed Crawmad is pretty neat with you needing to pop its eyes with your wing Pikmin so it exposes its weak point, but these guys pale in comparison to the other 6. The Armored Maudad makes good use of the Rock Pikmin, its body being encased in crystals that you need to break so you can directly attack it to kill it. It's fairly easy, but it's forgivable seeing that it is the first boss in the game. The Behemoth Fawzbad is invisible, with you needing to navigate the arena using yellow Pikmin to turn lights on, revealing it so that you can attack it. The atmosphere of this fight, the tension of seeing its shadow sweeping over the ground, as well as these tiny frickers getting in the way, keeps it fairly engaging. It's also the only fight in the game where you have to navigate and explore an arena in order to fight it. Most of the boss isn't even dedicated to directly attacking it, but trying to open it up to attack, making it stand out from the others. The Sand-Belching Meerslug is one of 2 bosses where part of the fight is how the boss changes the terrain, creating a moving mound as it maneuvers through the sand, and deep holes in the ground that you need to toss a bomb rock into to get it to jump out. This hole is also one of the most horrifying sights in the series, even if you know that all of your Pikmin are safe. I'd say it's my least favorite boss in the game, but it's still pretty good. The Scornet Maestro is dedicated to the winged Pikmin. For starters, it's designed like a hummingbird with a spiderweb harp in its beak, which is peak boss design. Since it's designed specifically for the Pikmin who suck at combat the most, it uses these bee things as both its primary method of attack and its shield. Like the other bosses in the game, it's about waiting for it to attack, leaving it vulnerable for you to counter it with your Pikmin. I think what puts it above the Sand-Belching Meerslug is that it's designed like a bird, and I like birds. It's better than the other bird boss in this series, and it also uses one of the most epic types of Pikmin. If I ignored these factors, I'd say it's tied with the previous boss. The Quaggled Meyerclops is consistently the boss that kills the most of my Pikmin in any playthrough, and I love him. He's the second boss that changes the terrain, but in a more dynamic and interesting way. The fight takes place in a muddy arena, and when it moves, it creates giant craters of water. This encourages you to use blue Pikmin in the fight, as they won't drown. However, you need to use rock Pikmin to open it up to attack, so on top of the fear of your troop getting crushed, you also need to worry about some of them drowning. The fight sees you needing to stun it by attacking its feet, or will also attempt to crush you. Once it's down, you need to attack the fruit-looking thing that acts as its weak point, but if you stay for too long, its giant tongue will sweep across to try and gather as much of the Pikmin to his mouth as possible. Even with all the horrific casualties, it's a ton of fun. The Plasm Wraith is currently my second favorite boss in the series. I find that I prefer the Ancient Sirehound by just a smidge. It's more fun and has more variety in its attacks. But where the Plasm Wraith reigns supreme above every other Pikmin final boss is in effectively utilizing every Pikmin type. Emperor Bulblax was designed to be beaten by exclusively yellows, which is a decision that still baffles me to this day. Titan Dweevil is similarly encouraged to be attacked with yellow Pikmin since electricity is an instant kill hazard, and whistling at the Pikmin isn't too bad if it uses its other attacks. And for as much as I love the Ancient Sirehound, with a group of purples, the rest act as moral support since the specific hazards are easily avoidable, or are more convenient to get rid of with a shock bomb or something like that. The Plasm Wraith actually forces you to use different kinds of Pikmin to take it down, throwing out cubes surrounded by electricity, a giant crystal, water, and fire. And if you have any winged Pikmin on you, they can act as moral support. The way that you fight it is also really unique compared to every other enemy and boss in the series. You have to send your Pikmin to destroy the blob masses that it will shoot out, so that when it reassembles itself, it'll be weaker. No other boss even attempts something as interesting as this. It's always about how it attacks you that differentiates them, not how you attack it. On top of all this, it's also just a really enjoyable fight that ends the game on as perfect a note as it could. I can understand why some people wouldn't put this at the top of the Pikmin pedestal, even ignoring the recent release of the fourth game. In lowering the skill floor to reach a wider audience, you do lose some of what made the challenge in the first two games rewarding. And a shorter campaign length can make it feel not quite as satisfying as the longer games. Whatever reason would prevent it from the top spot is perfectly valid. My goal with videos is to express an opinion and not try to convince people I'm right. Personally, I'm not bothered by the difficulty because trying to be as efficient as possible provides a sufficient level of challenge to satiate me, and while the campaign may be short, every second of it is the most fun content in the series. This game distills everything that I love about the series into a wonderful package, and even though 4 does some things a lot better, and is arguably the better game in general, Pikmin 3 remains my absolute favorite installment in the series, and it's gonna take a lot for a future installment to obtain its crown.